Hello, it's Claire from Imagine Design Create today. I'm here with a tutorial for you to show you some of the ideas that I've had using the stamps designed by Kerry Ann at Imagine Design Create. There's so much potential for these stamps. The more that I play with them, the more ideas I come up with. It is just endless. If you get the stamps home yourself, then obviously you'll have your own ideas. But I just want to give you just a few pointers, just a few ideas on the sorts of things that you can actually create with them. Now I've got this card that I want to try and recreate with you today. There's a few tips and techniques, stamping techniques, that I thought that you might like. As you can see, it's quite a stylised flower card. I'll be using the stamps that you see here. It's the Shape Your World stamps, the abstract border lines. This is what makes up the stems and the petals of the flower. Now it wouldn't be immediately obvious that that's what you can create with it, but that's the beauty of stamps. To me, stamps are perfect for the frustrated artist. You have ideas in your head, but you can't always quite put them onto paper the way that you are imagining them. So this is where stamps are just perfect for you. I've created a nice subtle background as well. I haven't used any design papers, I've created this myself. And again, I've used the stamps. The same abstract borders, the shapes here, the Shape Your World stamps. I've also added in a few of these mini grasses. These are one of my favourite stamps. They are so versatile, and I mean, it's a small set, but it really will be one of those ones that you reach for all the time in all of your crafting. So I'll be using those as well. And then another popular stamp set that we have are the block sentiments, and I'll be using that just as a finishing touch. There's so many different great words on here, so you can really customise the card or the project or your paper craft project to suit. Okay, so I said I'll be recreating this card here for you. I've already prepped the background. I'm using stamping card. It's something that you can actually find on our website, imaginedesignCreate.co.uk. I shall put all the details in the video description below, but it's our very own matte and layer card cuts. It's a 300 GSM rate smooth card. It's perfect for stamping on, perfect for blending on, perfect for all your mixed media, and this is what I use all the time now. So I've gone ahead and prepped because I've just, as I say, it's a white card that you can see there, and I've just coloured that with a distress ink, and the one that I've used here is antique linen. Now I will be recreating that blue card. If anyone who knows me and any of you who get to know me, I find it so hard to recreate the same card twice, so I like to do it in different colours, and it's a nice way for you to imagine the card in different colourways as well. We've all got our own favourite colours that we reach for, but as I say, I already created this by blending distress ink onto the background, and I'll just show you quickly how I do that. So I'm using the foam blending tool. It's actually on a handmade block that I use, but all I do, working onto a smooth blendable mat, or it could be a craft sheet or a glass cutting mat, circular motions. You start off on the blendable mat first, and that just diffuses the ink a little, and then you circular motions, you just then work on to the card there, and you can see that it actually builds up the colour. Now obviously you can go as subtle or as dark as you like with your project. I like quite a subtle background, and certainly for this technique it works. I've stayed more around the edges, and I've just got this like halo effect, so it's actually lighter in the middle. That is perfect for the technique that I'm using today. So as I said, I've already gone ahead and prepped that. Now to create the really subtle background, it's a great way to use more of your stamps. If you don't have any design paper to hand that suits your colourway, it's also a perfect technique to recreate your own. Now what I want to do is create like a meadow sort of scene, grasses and flowers in the background, and I want that to be really subtle but still visible. So I'm using the same ink that I've colour tinted the card with. So for this it will be the antique linen. So to start with, I'm going to take some of the grasses from the mini grasses set. So I'm going to take this larger stamp here, we'll put that on our acrylic block, and we just ink this with the distress ink. And we stamp that into the background just here. Now it is going to be ever so subtle, but that is the look that we're going for, and I think it's such an effective look, and I've done this on so many different projects, but you can see it there. It will dry slightly lighter, which means it will blend even more into the background, making it even more effective. So I shall continue stamping. Now I want to stamp this a second time. I don't want to use the whole block. I want to get some dimension into the card and some different height, so I'm just going to use the top half of the block. So it appears that the grasses are a lot more wispy, if you can see that there. Again, when you're using stamps, think about different ways you can use them. Actually look at the formation of the stamp. You don't have to use the whole stamp the whole time. Right, I'm going to stamp in between these two, and I'm going to use even less of the stamp this time, so I'm actually stamping off the paper and just using the wispy parts of the top of the stamp there. As you can see, it just gives a whole different look, but it gives you the impression of the grasses being unkempt, unmown, like it is in a meadow. So we've done that. Now next I'm going to take one of the stamps from the abstract border lines. I'm going to take the wavy stamp here. Now I'm going to create some of the like longer flower stems, grass stems, I suppose you'd call it. I've got a reasonable idea in my head as to the sort of thing that I want to create, so I just looked at my stamps to see what would help me recreate that. So again, I'm not actually inking the whole of the stamp. Probably most of the time I'll be using about 2/3 of this stamp, because that will just keep the dimensions of this piece perfect. And I know it's very faint. I shall hold it up to the camera in a second, but I'm just going to go ahead and stamp this stamp multiple times, as if it's just like tendrils and flower stems, wild flower stems, just coming up out of the grass there. Don't be afraid to overlap some of them. That just adds to the randomness. And we just carry on stamping there. Stamp that one a little bit more. Now I like to work with longer elements either side of the card. I just like the balance that gives. Again, it's something that you can play around with and you can find your own style. Now you see, as this is coming together, you can see the advantage of having that halo. It's like sunlight in the background there, and hopefully you can just see those stamps in the background there. So I've built those up. Now there's a really useful little stamp here, I don't know if you can see that, yes you can, with a little swirl on it. I just see that as like a fern frond. I don't know if you've been out walking in the woods, and if at this time of year, I think it is, and you just see all the new shoots coming up, and you see the ferns before they actually unfurl and the leaves sort of bloom. They're all curled up, and I find that fascinating. I take actually a lot of my inspiration from what I see out and about. particularly flowers and birds and whatever. So I'm just going to stamp a few of those in amongst these grasses here, and it just gives another element to look at. Now what I will do, again, just using the top swirl of this stamp, I'm going to line that up against one of the longer fronds here, and just having that come off the grass, so it actually starts forming patterns, and you wouldn't actually know where one stamp ends and another begins. Hopefully you can see that just there. And this is again why I love using stamps. You can build up so many things, so many different patterns, and create something entirely different from what it is that you've actually got within the stamp range. And you can create something, it can be different every single time. It could be different every single time that you create, and obviously different every single time somebody else creates. So it's always lovely when we see what other people have done and how other people use these stamps and these sets. I'll just raise that up. There we are. You can see the little swirls and amongst the grass there. Now to finish this background off, add a slightly different dimension, slightly different shape. I'm going to take from the abstract borders what looks like this bubble border. It's a series of little circles, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to use this as flowers. Again, I won't be using the whole stamp because as a flower head on this card that would be too long. So I'm just going to attach, you see, half of the stamp onto the block there, so, and just ink up little amounts of this stamp. And I'm going to attach these supposed flowers to the tops of these longer fronds here. And if you can see where I've stamped that, there we are. It actually gives the effect something like lavender, I suppose, or like these long grasses that you get with these seed heads that you see in meadows. That's the sort of effect I'm going for. So we just stamp a few of those. Again, because I'm still using the same ink, I'm still using the antique linen, which is what I've used to actually colour the whole of the card. But it just gives that beautiful background and just that little bit of interest, as opposed to stamping onto a white card. And you can see all the dimension there. Just going back to my Shape Your World stamps, they have tiny little shapes here, solid stamps, and I'm just going to use one of those on a small block, and I'm just going to fill in some of these little bubble shapes. Again, that just gives another element of texture to the card. I mean, it's all about building the layers and building the interest. Even though it's subtle, it does actually all help towards your composition of what you're making. So you can see there, beautiful background. I mean, you can just then stamp a sentiment on that and mount it onto a card blank, and I think that in itself would be a really pretty, dainty card. Okay, now we've done that, I'm going to go on and show you how to create those abstract flowers with these stamp sets that we have here. So going to the abstract border stamps again, I'm going to take this one here, you can see. Now I want to do 3 flower stems, because another technique that I'll show you here, because these stamps are clear and they are flexible, you can actually bend the stamps onto your acrylic block. It's perfectly fine, that won't damage them, as long as when you've finished you put them, you realign them and put them straight back onto the carrier sheet of the stamps there, but just bending them just for the purposes of this is absolutely fine. Now, I've created my subtle background, which now gives me the perfect canvas to come in with my bold focal elements. So I'm going to ink up my abstract border, which is going to be the stem of my flowers, and I'm stamping that in black Versafine. So I shall put my first stem there, and you can start seeing and appreciating now how the background works against the bold focal element. And this is where the modern element, I suppose, of this composition comes in. Right, I've just straightened up that stamp now for that central flower. I wanted those two sort of bending out away, and now this central flower I just want to come up through the middle like so. Now, to create the flower heads, again I'm going back to the Shape Your World stamp borders, and I'm going to use the circle outline there and the triangle outline. Now, there are so many other ways to use these stamps, and our design team members have come up with lots of different ways. So over the coming days and weeks, we'll be posting a lot more samples. And check out our Pinterest page and our Instagram page, and you'll see a lot more of the samples, a lot more of the ideas. And if you get these stamps, then we would love to see what you share with them also. So I'm just taking the single circle outline there. That's going to be the centre of our flower, and I'm just going to stamp that at the top of each of the stems there. Next, I take the triangle outline, and I'm just going to line that up on the grid of my stamping block here, just to help me line up a little bit. And these are going to be the petals. Now, I've practiced these on copy paper before I've done this, just to see how the shapes and the sizing work, so I know how to line them up. And this is the beauty of clear stamps and clear acrylic blocks. You can see where you're placing each of the images, so you are able to line up and pretty accurately where you're placing each image. So now I'm just going to work round and create the flower. Now, stopping just there actually, and as I say, it's just playing around. If you see where I've put the centre of the flower and the two petals, that actually looks like a sweet. I mean, that's something that you could stamp in itself, or that's a whole entirely different card design. You could perhaps use it for Christmas or a child's birthday card. Again, it's just the playing around, and this is why these stamps are so versatile, and I love playing with them. So you can see the way I'm lining it up, I'm just stamping the petals in pairs or in opposites, and that means that I can get a pretty good evenly spaced petal around the centre of the flower there. So now I can go in and fill the gaps. And you can see quite quickly that our flower is coming together. Now, I won't do all three flowers. I've actually prepared a third piece that I can show you, but what I do want to do is just show you how to do this flower. Now, it's going to be so close to this flower here, but with just a little bit of masking and using a bit of copy paper, you can actually stamp this flower so it appears to be, the petals appear to be behind this main image here. So I'm just going to place my first couple of reference petals so I know where I am. And you can see this is actually going off the page, so it gives a really nice impression of like the randomness of the design, and I really like that. Now when it comes to stamping this petal here, now this is going to obviously overlap. If that's the look that you're after, then obviously that's perfectly fine. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some copy paper. Really nothing special at all. You can see that I've already used this before. I'm going to use the straight edges of this, and I'm just going to cover these triangles that I've already stamped. By covering them, obviously I shan't be over stamping onto them. Now I can take my stamp, my triangle stamp, and I can begin stamping my petals again. Obviously it overlaps onto the copy paper, which is what I wanted. We can make sure that we stamp the other petals in before we remove the copy paper. Now obviously you can, there's other ways of using masks. You can stamp your triangle onto like a sticky note or a post-it note, and cover the triangle. You can then cut it out. Then you can cover the triangles that you've already stamped. That's a perfectly feasible way of doing that as well. I have to admit that I can be a bit lazy, and if there's a simpler way of doing that, or masking like this with the copy paper, then I tend to go for this method. It's whichever technique suits you the best. But now that we can take that away, you can actually see that these petals sit behind this flower. And I shall just finish stamping the rest of these petals. And there we have our two flowers, and obviously you'd carry on stamping and create the third. Now I did say I've already prepared another piece here where I've actually stamped all three flowers, and again I did say that I've struggled to do the same card twice or even 3 times, so you can see here that I've actually done this background in green, and I've already stamped my 3 flowers. Now the ideal thing about stamping in this way, you'll notice that the flowers have turned out differently on all 3, so none of your projects will ever turn out the same, which makes each of your projects unique, which is great for those, obviously the recipients that you give them to, because they get a unique piece of work from you each time. Now on this sample I just wanted to show you how I filled in the flower petals and the flower centres. You'll notice on the stamp sheet here that as well as the outline stamps, we also have filled in shapes. Some with patterns in, some with solids. They've all got their use, and again it just adds to the versatility of this stamp set. I'm going to use the stamps with the holes in, I suppose you'd call it, but they're a solid stamp, and these cut out pieces will actually be blank, so I shall, where are they? Just take the circle and the triangle, put them onto my clear blocks, and this time I'll actually be stamping in a colour. I've chosen to use pink, and this time instead of Distress ink I'm going with a Memento dye ink, purely because it adds a real good pop of colour, and the dye ink is a real shot of colour, because this is what you will actually want to stand out on this piece. So we ink our stamp, and these have been so cleverly designed that all these solid shapes all the shapes within the circles, the triangles, the squares or whatever, they all actually fit and layer into each other. So you can line these up really well and actually fill in the shapes that you've already stamped. If they go slightly outside of the outline, the black outline, I think that looks good as well, because it adds to that sort of arty, modern feel. So I don't mind that at all. Obviously you don't have to use the stamps to colour them in. You can use any of your colouring mediums, your alcohol pens or colouring pencils. Entirely up to you. You could even stamp the outlines onto a design paper, cut them out, and then stick them or decoupage them onto the background here. And that will give you a whole different look again. And you can see now the real pop of colour, and you can see the advantage of having the real subtle background here. Right, I'm just going to take the triangle, and I'm just going to fill in the petals of the centred flower here, and I'm going to use that again the same way as I stamp these circles. So these are really bold, and I can just go around and fill those in. Now I love this part of the process. You can actually see your design coming towards its end, and to me it actually makes me feel like a real, a real artist. It's a pleasure to create with stamps like this, and to create and knowing that you've actually stamped all of this. Now that is really effective. I like that. I'm going to fill in the triangles of these second and third flowers, but instead of going direct from the stamp pad to the piece there, to my artwork, I'm actually going to stamp this off onto a piece of copy paper. So I'm using the second generation ink, which actually makes that appear a lot fainter. Still pink, but it just fades into the background. Again, it just gives you another look, and it's just working towards that whole versatility of your stamping products. It's entirely up to you, of course. You may want to either do these flowers in a completely different colour, or you might want them all as bold as each other. The choice is entirely yours, and that, to me, is what crafting is all about. So we'll just go ahead and we'll stamp them quickly. It's worth taking a little bit of time before you start these compositions like this, just to work out your colours as well. I think just work out and make sure that the colours work well together. There we are. Now, to me, this really doesn't take very much to finish. I like to give cards that can perhaps be framed or kept as a piece of artwork afterwards. So all I'm going to put, instead of a happy birthday, I'll put some other wording or sentiment on there. These block sentiments are great for that because you have a great choice, but all I'm going to put on there, I think, and I might actually do this, I'm just working out which is the best way to do that. I might actually stamp the sentiment up this way. I'm stamping this in black. It'll be a really nice statement. Okay, stamping this sentiment in black there just adds a real pop, a real modern element, I think. Now, I've already prepared the card blank. It's one of the mats and layers again. All I've done is taken the background colour and just colour tinted around the edge of my layer there. and mounted that onto a white card blank. So there we have that. Using the same technique, but two very different cards. I like the colourways on either of them, on both of them just as much. Hope you enjoyed that today. I hope I've given you a little bit of inspiration to try something different with your stamping. All information on products I've used and our other social media galleries, so you can get more ideas and tips. I'll put that in the description of the video below. But I hope you enjoyed watching today, and we'll see you again soon.